Good evening. Good evening. Welcome parents, caregivers, community leaders, healthcare professionals, and worldwide families to Civic-ing safely, mitigating the risks of COVID-19 in voting and in schooling. I'm your host, Janean Lewis, and I'm the Districtwide Social Studies Coordinator for Atlanta Public Schools. In that role, I write curriculum, history, civics, government, and economics, and I also develop the district's engagement programming dealing with our partnerships. Before we get started, let's make sure you register at the link in the chat so that we can send you information and keep you in the loop on resources as they become available. This will be the first of 8 COVID community conversations brought to you by The Gathering Spot, the BLK+Cross, and Fulton County. The purpose of tonight's conversation is to provide a trusted space for our community to engage experts in balancing the realities of COVID-19 with voting in the 2020 election and schooling our children safely. Amongst all the mixed messages regarding public and personal health and well-being, this conversation is critical. Before I go any further, I'd like to personally thank the Coalition for the People's Agenda, Fulton County, The Gathering Spot, BLK+Cross, and YouTube for partnering with us and lending their platforms to this important cause. Once again, welcome. Now let's introduce you all to the amazing roundtable panelists. I'm going to have them chime in on what it is that they do to contribute to our community in under a minute each. Let's all welcome Ms. Helen Butler, Executive Director of the Georgia chapter of the Coalition for the People's Agenda. Based in Atlanta, this CPA is active throughout the state of Georgia and works to support and establish state coalitions in the southeast states of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Ms. Butler, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to work with the coalition.
Hi, Janean.
Hi.
I'm glad to be here as a part of this program. What brought me to this work, well, really was my brother, Walter Butler, the Jr., who happened to be president of the state conference of the NAACP. So I came to work with him and the NAACP, but I got to meet Dr. Joseph Lowery, who was the founder of the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. And so after I finished my work with the NAACP, I came to work with the coalition and Dr. Lowery, Reverend James Orange, and so many of the civil rights leaders whose primary purpose was to get people engaged in elections and civic engagement, rather, to really have people understand why policy impacts them, why elected officials matter, why it matters that they exercise their right to vote. And of course, Dr. Lowery and all those civil rights leaders were instrumental in helping us pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act that gave protections, especially to Black people and communities of color, that would allow them to exercise their right without barriers. So to me, it's critical. And that's why I came to be engaged in this process.
Well, it is great to have you this evening, and we're excited to jump right in. Thank you for coming, Ms. Butler.
Thank you.
And next we have Fulton County Commissioner Marvin Arrington. Commissioner Arrington, please tell us about yourself and all of the things that you cover in your role as commissioner with Fulton County.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. It's always a tough act to follow Helen Butler, but I will do my best. As Fulton County Commission, we are responsible for setting the budget for Fulton County. So we manage about $1 billion a year of taxpayer money. That's taxpayer money through property taxes and also through car tag taxes. So we try to manage that money as efficiently and as best as we can. We are also in charge of elections for Fulton County, which, as you stated in your opening, we've had to, ramp up our election efforts this year, not only because it's a presidential year, but because we've got new equipment and because of the pandemic. Now we have to find a way to make sure that everyone can vote safely. And so that's what we're going about doing, as well as trying to make sure that everyone completes their census.
Wonderful. That is a heavy lift. Well, thank you for being here tonight, Commissioner.
Thank you for having me.
And next, let's welcome Ms. Kyomi Rollins. She is a community economics strategist and co-founder of the Connect Cooperative, which is a co-op for entrepreneurs. Kyomi, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what community economic strategy entails.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I see I'm amongst great folks here on this panel. So I'm a part of a movement that is reimagining what equitable community development looks like. So the community has these really great solutions on how we can develop our spaces. And so being a community economics strategist is over here at the Connect, leading solutions that are actually driven by the community and seeking out ways that we can have some sustainability with the community actually having ownership in the spaces where they work, play, and live.
I'm feeling a little cooperative economics, some
yes.
Kwanzaa principles.
Yes.
Well, it's great to have you. I can't wait to jump in with these topics with you tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And next we have Dr. Maisha Otway. She is a transformational elementary school principal in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Dr. Otway has served as a teacher and school leader in a variety of socioeconomic demographics and has a track record in the most affluent and the most underserved schools. Dr. Otway, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Need to take myself off of mute. I do this all day long and I still sometimes mess up. Thank you all for having me. It's very excited to be a part of this discussion. When we think about schools, we think about the education of voting, but then we think about the education of Black and Brown children in the community and what the impact COVID has had on the community. So definitely being a part of the discussion when we think about how do we keep our community safe and how do we keep our children safe within the school. As school principals, we're always navigating community change, but this pandemic of COVID and these elections have brought up topics that are very integral to our community. So it makes us definitely important and excited to be here with this experience and support the community on these topics.
Well, we can't wait to hear all about your experiences and what you are doing as a school leader. We are happy to have you this evening, Dr. Otway.
Thank you.
And finally, let's all welcome Lyndon Waller, who is the Programs Director for the Coalition for the People's Agenda. Mr. Waller, please tell us a little bit about your role there with the Coalition.
Thank you, Janean. Thank you all for being with us tonight. My name is Lyndon Waller. I'm the Programs Director for the People's Agenda. And so what we do is make sure that we're registering, educating, and mobilizing our communities across the state. Ms. Butler didn't mention it, but we have 7 offices across Georgia. Atlanta, Athens, Savannah, Augusta, LaGrange, and Albany and Macon. So we're active all across the state, and my job is to make sure that we're getting out in our communities and getting our folks registered.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Waller, for being here this evening. So we're going to jump right into the discussion. We have a lot to cover this evening. Just a couple of community norms for our conversation this evening. I will post a question and ask it of a specific panelist. We'll give that panelist some time to respond to that. And if any other panelists would like to weigh in, just simply give me a thumbs up or a hands up or unmute yourselves and let us know what it is that you want to say. First up, we're going to start with Butler. Our first topic is civic engagement, and more specifically, voting safely and with confidence that our votes will be counted. Ms. Butler, tell us more about the work that your organization, the Coalition for the People's Agenda, does on an ongoing basis in the area of voter empowerment.
Well, thank you. And as Lyndon said, We do a lot of civic engagement work, not only registering people to vote, but we try to educate them about the process, about the candidates. We mobilize them, we get them out to vote, we phone bank, we text, we call them to make sure they know where to go. We provide rides to the polls for them, but we also do a lot of election protection work. That is where we actually can go and assist voters as they vote to ensure they don't encounter any barriers. And if they need us to help them to go inside to assist with their voting, then we do that. But we also do some issue advocacy around economic development, around the environment, around criminal justice reform. Education is very critical because that's my favorite subject, education. And so healthcare and other issues that impact our community. So while we do issue advocacy, we try to connect it and show the connection between public policy as it impacts any area of our life, from birth to death, everything in between. We're all impacted by some public policy that an elected official makes. So what we try to do is get people to be engaged in that process. And for us, COVID has really had an impact in that we normally are out in the street meeting people, going to the neighborhoods, actually interacting with people. So now we've had to find different means to do that, whether it's either through Zoom meetings, because we meet every Tuesday from 12 to 2, and we invite everybody to become a part of that. Go to thepeoplesagenda.org, sign up for our email list, so you'll get information about how you can join and be a part of what we do. So we do it, we're doing everything remotely. We're back in the field right now, but we're practicing safe distancing. We're having PPE equipment for our people that work for us. We're doing things that CDC says that we should do safely. We're making sure we're 6 feet socially distancing. So those have had an impact, but it's also impacted how people vote. So we're trying to mitigate some of those problems, explain to people how to use vote by mail because it's safe. You don't have to go in person especially for our seniors who are adversely impacted by COVID. So we're doing those kinds of activities to really make sure we continue the process, because every election counts. And COVID has highlighted that. What else can you say? If people are complaining about, I didn't get my $600 unemployment benefit check, well, some public policy, some decision makers made that decision whether you get that $600 or not. So that's been on a federal level. So we want you to understand the connectivity between those issues that impact you every day and how voting can make the difference. You get the right people elected that will make the decisions to have a law that will benefit you and your family. And as Commissioner Arrington talked about, the census, the money, how that goes, all of that's connected, and all of it's been impacted by COVID. So we've got to do things a little differently.
Ms. Butler, knowing that the Coalition for People's Agenda works on behalf of some of our most vulnerable populations, the elderly, low income, essential workers, what are your greatest concerns about these communities?
Well, the greatest concern is that first we've got to have equity. We've got to have we've got to learn to build our economic power as well as our political power. So we've got to make our communities stronger so that we are able to survive. We got to have entrepreneurs, like I'm sure this young lady that's going to tell us about Connect, how you make that happen in the communities. So all of those things are great for our community, but it all starts with right now, us being able to vote, participate in that census, because the census determines the money that comes back to our neighborhoods. It determines who will get to elect us, how we draw our maps in terms of the people that represent us. So it's very critical that our people understand how important voting is and being engaged in that electoral process works, and that we can't sit any election out thinking that someone else is going to make a decision. It takes away our power. And numbers matter. Numbers make a difference. I'm telling you, you can't just skip a race and say, oh, somebody else is going to vote for that. But that your one vote may mean the difference between one person winning over the other person. So we've got to understand what that process means and be engaged in it.
Absolutely. And if you weren't listening to everything Ms. Butler said, fill out your census, be prepared to vote, and make sure you get to the polls. Thank you, Ms. Butler. That was a whole word at the beginning of this evening. Thank you. So Mr. Waller, in Atlanta Public Schools, we're doing a lot. We're trying our best to make sure that all of our students get registered. We're running into barriers. We're going to make sure that as many students as possible and their families get to the polls. I understand that you work closely with Ms. Butler at the Coalition for the People's Agenda, and that you all have a lot of emphasis on young first-time voters in this election cycle. So tell us more about the work that you are doing to empower young and young adult voters.
Right. So in a non-COVID environment, we will probably be at 10, 15 schools a week, making sure that their seniors and eligible students are able to register and are aware of the elections and the deadlines and things like that are coming up. However, in this environment, since we're not able to have that physical presence, we're still trying to coordinate with the schools that we've built relationships with over the past couple decades to ensure that their students are still able to register, know of those important dates and deadlines, and ensuring that if they need a means to make it to the polls, that we're able to provide that route for them.
Awesome. I'm aware of many of the barriers that we're facing. How can people help? Like, how can people help you and the team at the Coalition for the People's Agenda to make sure that we can get the young people to the polls?
The first thing that they can do is ensure that they're registered to vote, and if they're not, make sure that they register their family members, their cousins, their students, whatever it may be. Make sure they're taking those steps to ensure that they're ready for the November election. Secondly, see what their plan is to vote. Make sure that they're actually vote ready for the November election. If they can't make it to the polls, ask them if they want to request an absentee ballot, or what other means that they'll use to vote on election day, or early voting, or whatever plan they may have. So just taking those necessary steps at home will make sure that they're ready for November or for early voting, which starts a little over a week from now.
Thank you. And I know that you work closely. One of your partners is Black Youth Vote, correct?
Right. Yep.
So what do you anticipate the voter turnout amongst young people might be? And how do you think COVID is going to play into that? Or do you think it's going to impact it negatively?
I don't think it's going to impact it negatively, because if it was, it would have happened during the June 9th primary. We saw record-setting turnout for a primary election back in June, and things were, much worse than what they are now in terms of things being shut down. So it's just our part to make sure that we're educating all of our Black youth across the state, across the nation, on how important this election is, and every election is, but making sure that, we're not wasting that energy that we had out in the streets in the summer, ensuring that they're still using that energy when they're turning out to the polls.
Got it. Wonderful. Wonderful. Rollins, we know that you also are a strong advocate for voter empowerment in the community. Help us understand more about the connection between community economics and voter engagement and empowerment.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that we have an emphasis on is, one, supporting existing organizations that are already doing some really great work, but also from an entrepreneur level, sharing how public policy actually impacts legacy business owners, Black-owned businesses, that may already be experiencing displacement. And so one of the ways that we are really able to engage Black-owned businesses in our community about voting is this public policy and zoning. Zoning and ordinances sometimes do have a negative impact on Black-owned businesses just because of the fees, some of the citations that a business owner may experience. And so very recently, a couple of years ago, in our own community, we were able to institute an actual law, like a piece of legislation that was focused all around making sure that we could kind of put some things in to kind of mitigate gentrification and displacement. So our work is really around business owners really understanding their power. Politics is at a very local level. So making sure that we're holding our city council officials, accountable, making sure that it's not just Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr. that hears our voice, right? So I think there's an opportunity for business owners to actually advocate for themselves. And what we've learned historically in Atlanta, if there's not a piece of policy that supports that, it doesn't matter how many times we show up mad at people because of certain policies after the fact. If we didn't vote to put people in power that are really going to advocate for us, it's not going to matter. So our work has been around learning. I love public policy. I wish I would have had the opportunity to learn about it at an earlier age. And so we spend a considerable amount of time looking at laws and pieces of policy that impact our community. And now because of COVID, we're rallying a lot of business owners here in Southwest Atlanta to vote, because we need to be able to look at what officials have done pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. And sometimes that relationship looks a little different. And then to have serious conversations about what our plan is experiencing COVID and then next year. And then what type of policy do we need to create to be able to impact and influence our community?
So how can we support these efforts? Like, how can we individually consider donating our time to empower business owners, empower voters in this election cycle? How can we pitch in?
I think the biggest thing is you have some amazing dynamic folks on this panel. So you want to support the work that already exists. I think one of the beautiful things about Black folks, when we get an idea, there's already some organizations that have some teeth in the game. So I think, one, look at the organizations that are here on this panel to be able to support them. I also think acknowledge the frustrations of the youth and first-time voters. This election is not when Obama ran, right? So we have to really acknowledge the frustration of that young people have about voting. And I think what I'm hearing from young people, because I have a couple of them in my home, is that when they're talking about things that concern them, sometimes the answer is just saying, go vote. Yes, so we still have to acknowledge the frustrations and kind of hear some of those challenges that they have. Like that debate last night was challenging for all of us, right? So I think how do we support it is seek out organizations that already exist. I think you could, that day of the polls, if I'm encouraging everyone to early vote, and if you have, make sure you're supporting people that are actually in line. Make sure that you are being able to share with elderly that they can, if they have a disability, that they can kind of get to the front of the line, support them with water, hand sanitizers, wipes, fans. I think those are just some very basic on-ground things. And also know your polling place. I think we heard that a little bit, or what I saw during the June 9th election was we had a lot of people giving misinformation about where their polling place is. And so I think to be able to support that. And then, I don't know, Commissioner Arrington, make sure we got plugs and chargers. I know in my district, there was only one plug for, 5 machines. So I don't know, bring some extra chargers and batteries, y'all, for that day. But I would say support the work that a lot of these great organizations are already doing. You could start there. That's a major start because Ms. Helen, Mr. Linden, Commissioner Arrington, there's already a game plan and a really dope strategy in place. So all you have to do is just be able to call any of us up and ask, how can we help? And I'm pretty sure you will not be lost for what support we're looking for and that we need.
We've been trying to encourage our young people to volunteer at the polls. I know we all saw this past summer and in the spring with the new machines. Some of our staff were just not equipped with the background and technology to fix the machines. So hopefully we'll get an influx of young volunteers to help support those who have been in the trenches every election for generations. Thank you for that. So Commissioner Arrington, I'm coming back to you.
All
I'd like
right.
to turn to you for this next part of this conversation. We've heard concerns from some of our panelists about the safety of our community while voting and some of the barriers. As a representative of the county, what are your thoughts on the safest way for constituents to vote to minimize the risk of COVID?
Well, I think absentee ballots, mailing in your ballots, is probably the single most safest way to prevent you or your family from getting COVID-19. I'm a big fan of early voting, but with early voting, you still have to go to the polling location. For this election, we'll have 30 early voting locations, and there should be 5, according to the chair of our Board of Registration and Elections. There will be 5 early voting precincts in each of the 6 districts in the county. And so we'll have a few. We'll have the State Farm Arena. Again, it'll be a big super mega site. We also will have the GICC, the Georgia International Convention Center. That'll be another big site. So we're really excited about doing a good job. We did have a few challenges, as always, with elections and dealing with people. We all err, and so we had some errors at the during the June 9th election. But our county manager and our team has gotten together, and instead of people trying to get to the polls at 6 o'clock, we have a shift that starts at 3 a.m. And so we have people there from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. making sure that everything is working properly. And in fact, they're typically there the day before, making sure that everything is working properly. But then typically the lights get shut off at night, then you have to turn all the lights back on, restart, reboot all the machines. And sometimes the computer has a mind of its own. It does what you tell it to do, not what you want it to do. And so we have to be mindful of that. But we are taking this election very seriously. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote. But and we'll be, having hand sanitizer and all of that stuff at the voting locations so that everyone can stay safe. But absentee ballots, I believe, mail-in absentee ballots, or dropping them off. We also have the drop-off location. So you get your absentee ballot. There's certain libraries and other county facilities that you can go to and just drop your absentee ballot off in an election box.
Now, can you clear up for me and for those people watching? I've heard of absentee ballots. I voted by absentee ballot when I was in college. Is there a difference between absentee voting and voting by mail, or is it the same thing?
So absentee and voting by mail are one and the same. What we have done to make it easier for people, instead of having to mail in the application, we have drop box locations around the county. So you can drive to, and I'm just going to use the Wolf Creek Library as an example. You could drive to the Wolf Creek Library and deliver your absentee ballot directly into an election box, and then from there it will be counted.
Wonderful. Thank you for clearing that up. And for everybody watching at home, we know the deadline to register to vote is Monday, October 5th. If you are registered, you need to check and make sure that your information is correct and make sure you are still eligible and registered to vote. And all of that information, once you have logged on to this live stream, there was a registration prompt for you. So we will be putting all of that information in the chat that you can access later on this evening. Thank you so much, Commissioner. So,
and if I can just briefly, we do have early voting from October 12th to October 30th, and that includes 2 Saturday voting days and 2 Sunday voting days. The 2 Saturday voting days are October 17th and 24th, and the 2 Sunday voting dates are October 18th and October 25th. So please take advantage. If you don't do absentee ballot, take advantage of early voting so that we can minimize. Again, one of the ways to minimize the problems on election day is getting as many people to vote early as we can.
And when you vote early at the polls, is there a specific polling place? Do you have to go to your polling place, or is there an early voting area? How does that work?
Great question. So, in fact, one of the other advantages of early voting is you can vote anywhere in the county for early voting. However, state law requires on election day, you have to vote at your precinct only. So the other advantage of voting early is you can vote at any precinct in the county. And hopefully we can maybe get the state legislature to change so that on election day you can vote at any precinct in the county. That would make it a lot easier for people.
That's great information. So early voting is the way to go. Early voting.
And we will have 2 mobile voting centers. For the first time this year, we'll have 2 mobile voting centers that will be going to hot spots and places where there are long lines. So be on the lookout for those as well.
And I just want to say that this is for Fulton County only. All those dates he gave, except the mandatory Saturday, October the 24th, is for statewide. But the 2 Sundays and the 2 Saturday voting, that's Fulton County doing something above and beyond what the law calls for. And we really appreciate that, their desire and their commitment to make sure people exercise their right to vote. But every county does not have that. There are 159 counties. So in case there are people that are watching this that are not residents of Fulton County, then we want to make sure they understand what he said is applicable to Fulton County. Because early voting dates are the same for everybody. But the one mandatory Saturday is for everybody in the state. I just want to make sure we made that distinction in case there are other people that don't live in Fulton that are looking at this particular broadcast.
Absolutely. And I will just say for the record, I am so proud that I live in Fulton County, because as you said, Ms. Butler, that is above and beyond, especially the mobile center to help with the overflow. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for making that happen. But before we leave the topic of voting by mail, one more thing we got to talk about. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of propaganda in the media about voting by mail, alleging that it allows for a great deal of voter fraud. But from what we understand and what our research tells us is that the likelihood of voter fraud is minimal, if that. In fact, it's more likely that an American will be struck by lightning than that he or she will impersonate another voter at the polls. And out of more than 1 billion ballots cast, 1 billion with a B, there were only 31, as in less than 40, more than 30, 31 out of 1 billion credible instances of impersonation and voter fraud from 2000 to 2014. So in a 14-year period, only 31 cases out of 1 billion of voter fraud. Commissioner, should we be concerned about double voting or voter fraud in Fulton County?
Well, I think we always want to make sure that we protect the integrity of our election process. But I don't think that voter fraud or people impersonating people is one of the biggest things that we have to worry about. Frankly, I'm concerned more about voter intimidation and people trying to prevent people from going to the polls. And so, we need to be prepared on all sides. I've been hearing rumors that they're going to stand out in front of our polling precincts with, Confederate flags and guns and try to prevent people from going to the polls. So we have to do everything we can to prepare for that. And so we'll be making sure that we have, adequate security at these precincts as well. I'm more worried about voter intimidation, voter disenfranchisement than I am about voter fraud. It's just, as you stated, you have a bigger chance of getting struck by lightning. It's less than 1% of the entire total vote. So the bigger issue is making sure that we don't allow our young people and others to be disenfranchised from exercising their right to vote.
You said a mouthful there, Commissioner Arrington, and I know we all might be concerned about voter intimidation, especially after the comments made in last night's debate. So it's wonderful that in Fulton County that you all are ahead of that and making sure that our voters are safe. And we hope, Ms. Butler pointed out, we're speaking specifically about Fulton County. So we hope that the commissioners in other counties around the state and frankly around the country make sure that they keep their voters safe in the same way that our Fulton County election officials are making sure that we are safe. So thank you for that, Commissioner.
No, thank you.
Well, we're going to have election protection monitors, by the way, that will actually be at certain polling locations as well. We use a toll-free hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-687-8683, that if you encounter any kind of problem on election day or during early voting, you can call that number. It's manned by lawyers. So we'll be able to respond, and we'll have people on the ground who may be both lawyers and non-lawyers, but they will be trained to assist voters should we see problems like that, intimidation, whatever that may be occurring at polling locations. So we need volunteers or people to work with us. We'll pay a stipend for people to assist us with that. So we want them to come and assist in that process. We train you on what to do, how to do it. Lyndon is our captain of that program, so he can talk about it more so than I can. But I wanted to make sure that people know that there is protection out there for them. Not only will, of course, sometimes having a lot of police at the precinct can be intimidating to a commissioner.
Yes.
But we understand we got to have a good balance and make sure that the police aren't, trying to block people like roadblocks and stuff like that. Those are barriers too that can be intimidating. Yeah. So we want to make sure, that's why we have lawyers and grassroots volunteers that can actually assist voters should they encounter those kind of problems. We'll be monitoring social media as well to make sure that we're alerting and up on all of the potential problems within a particular county and within the state. So we want people to know that.
Well, Ms. Butler, I feel safe already, but I think I may want to ride with you.
Please do come join me.
Ride with you, Ms. Butler, because I can tell already that being with you might be the safest place to be, because you are not playing about this election, Ms. Butler.
No.
As well.
And I'm going to have to leave, but I do want to thank you all again for doing this and for educating. And I wanted to hear about the schools, but I'm sure Lyndon keep me updated on that. And Lyndon can handle any other questions with regards to voting. So I'm going to have to leave for another engagement. So thank you so much for having me as a part of this.
Thank you for coming, Ms. Butler. We will see you soon.
All hail the Queen.
Bye.
All right, Linda, you've got some big shoes to fill. We're going to keep going. I think you can handle it. We're going to keep the conversation going. Commissioner, can you just talk to us very quickly about some of the public health precautions that we'll be taking at the polls with PPE and distancing, just so people feel comfortable to come vote in person if they need to?
Yes, definitely. That is one of the reasons that we are glad to partner with the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm. So we're able to use that big venue in the Georgia International Convention Center to make sure that we have more than enough room to spread out the polling machines so that people can actually vote, making sure that there's 6 feet distance between each machine, between each polling location, and between the different greeters and the check-in table and all of those things. We will have plastic or plexiglass up to protect the voters and the workers. And so, you know, when we talk about protection, is certainly we want to make sure that we protect the worker, the voters, but at the same time, we also have to make sure that we protect our workers as well. We'll have over 900 people working on that day. We were hiring, and I think, an additional 700 people just for election day. So we will have PPE at each location. Now, we're asking people to bring their own mask. We will have some masks in case people do not have a mask, but we're asking everyone to bring their own mask. And we'll have hand sanitizer. We'll have markings on the ground so that you can make sure that you're 6 feet away. And again, the polling locations that we have, the ballot drop boxes around the city at various libraries and other Fulton County properties. You can drive up to that location and virtually, without even leaving your car, deposit your absentee ballot into a ballot box. So that is another great way to make sure that we all can stay COVID free.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So you can mail in your ballot, you can fill out your absentee ballot and drop it off at a drop-off location at one of our polling places. You can vote early at any place or any polling location in the county, or if you do decide to vote in person on election day, there are measures in place to make sure you are safe physically and for your health. We've got it all covered for Fulton County, and we hope that our surrounding counties in the metro area are taking the same precautions as Commissioner Arrington and the team in Fulton County. So thank you so much. I'm going to take a moment to check and make sure there are no questions in the chat. No questions in the chat. So we're going to keep moving and shift into a conversation about schooling. So if you are not speaking, panelists, please mute so that our audio is focused just on those who are speaking. So now we're going to talk about schooling safely, assuring that the physical, educational, social, and emotional safety of children is intact. Let's shift, and we're going to start with Principal Otway. But first, a few data points. When COVID first began, we were told that kids, for all intents and purposes, were immune to the effects of COVID-19. But recent data and experience shows us that this is not the case, especially when we consider children of color. 3 times as many Black children as white children report exposure to COVID-19. Hispanic children are hospitalized for coronavirus at a rate almost 8 times their white counterparts. In fact, a recent study by the CDC looked at the hospitalization rates and characteristics of children under 18 with laboratory confirmed COVID-19, and of 570 cases of multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is a severe version of COVID-19, more than 74% of those cases were Black and Hispanic children. Principal Otway, you've been so patient with us. Thank you for hanging in there as we work through our voting conversation and making sure everyone had all of their information. I'd like us to talk a little bit about your experience as an educator in the county when it comes to schooling children safely. You've given us areas to consider: physical safety, educational safety, social emotional safety, and racial progression safety. So let's start with physical safety. What measures are you taking place at your school to assure the safety of students, their families, and the administration?
So thank you. Those are all groups that we have to protect separately and differently, because we don't want to get into, just like you mentioned with the data, that children can't get it. So let them all come back to school, be around each other, not follow any of the CDC guidelines. So some of the major aspects, the biggest umbrella for Fulton County is that Fulton County Schools has looked at it that parents have an option. Now you have to make your election for, not for political election, your election for your decision by October 2nd. So by October 2nd, you want to let the district know what is your plan when everyone comes back face to face. That's a big public safety, school safety decision, because then you're in control if you are able to have your child stay home with you. So if you're able to schedule and get support for your child through remote learning, universal remote learning, that's the big umbrella, because your child is at home with you and they're not exposed to school. When parents make that decision, then that turns into less students in the building. So if you have on average throughout the district about half of families, and they still have until October 2nd, but the way the data is falling in, about half families per school across the district are choosing to stay home, and that's across high school through elementary. They're choosing to stay home because they have the option. Then that turns around and it keeps students safe because there are less students within the building. So the class sizes become smaller, even though they're still taught by the same teachers. We have some strategies in place to do some simultaneous and segmented instruction. Another piece for those students that come to school, we have to consider what do they need to do and how do we continue to keep them safe. That's looking at, they have to have a mask. At one point, there was a decision where they weren't going to be required to wear a mask. Adults would, but the students wouldn't. So that keeps the child as well as the staff, administrators, and students safe at school. We also talk to parents. If you know your child is going to have difficulty wearing a mask all day, let's have some discussion about what is the best setting and what services and resources can we find for your child to have some sort of remote learning so that they're not being, having challenges with keeping themselves safe in school. Other things, we have pump stations throughout the building that we've never had before, hand sanitizers within the classroom throughout the building. When we talk about donations, we love to have extra masks. The district has provided some level of masks through special funding, but then there are always small children over a period of time through October, November, and December, and how long this goes on, our parents going to be able to replenish their masks when they come into school. And so those are things to consider if you're considering donating, as well as water bottles. We don't allow the students to drink from the water faucets, but throughout the district, there are different options. We happen to have touchless water stations and then water fountains in the classroom, but those touchless water stations are cleaned regularly, but then all families don't have water bottles. So things about making sure that children have the water and the hydration that they need throughout the day, and then keeping them safe so they're not drinking from the water fountain. We want to make sure that our staff are safe. And when we think about how we orchestrate their class sizes and making sure that we're keeping them safe from each other, giving them the technology so that they can have online meetings, even though they're teaching the students in front of them, we want to keep that option open for them. We have hand washing schedules. So teachers submit their hand washing schedules, making sure they have enough soap. And for the adults, making sure they have lotion, because we don't want to age on our hands faster because of COVID. But our hand modeling dates don't need to go away. But so those are things that we make sure that are happening on a regular basis that fall in line with the CDC. We also have a communication train that is hosted by the district. If you think you have a fever, we dictate that you have a fever, it's not just the regular clinic where you're going to sit in the clinic exposed to other children who maybe bruised their knee, who maybe got a finger cut. There's a separate clinic and it's at a special entrance throughout the building. So parents don't have to walk through all the way throughout the building to get their student or their child, so that the child is isolated and safe, and the parents can come in and out and collect their child. So there's a lot of different steps that are taking place. We can't ensure 100% you will not catch COVID being within the building, but we also can't guarantee that they caught it from the building once we're utilizing the CDC precautions. Another things that we do for the adults, it's hard when teachers get, Janine, you get in that classroom, you start teaching, you forget about the fact that these are babies, these are students. Even in high school, you want to sit down next to them. We give our teachers reminders throughout the day, not in a barking way, because we know they're there for the kids. We got into education because we love children. Yeah. And we want to connect with them. We want to talk with them. We don't want to stand 6 feet away speaking through a mask all day long. But we have to remind our staff, all right, remember, it's wash down Wednesdays, even though they have a cleaning cycle that the custodial staff takes care of, as well as the teachers. They have their individual bottles and they clean the areas. They have their little break times. But we want to remind them, continue to say, all right, keep it at the front of your mind, because we don't want that to be a dangerous mistake that they make. Limit large groups. Lots of volunteers want to come into the school, and we love having volunteers, and that world has kind of changed. And now that people have more time to spend with our schools, we really can't allow them to come in. But we say you can donate meals to support our teachers because they're working hard in this new environment. And so you can donate masks, you can donate water bottles, things like that. But we limit large groups. As much as we like to celebrate kids and assemblies, those supports have been cut out, but we have allowed after school programming that once again follows that same reduced number, keeping that 6 feet space. And then just the education and the communication of the updates. COVID moves rapidly and looks differently in different buildings when it comes to busing, when it comes to food, when it comes to nutrition, being able to communicate all of those resources and providing the resources that families need if they have to stay home in emergencies. So over time, some schools, even though we're rolling into an opening for face-to-face, we still have a closure matrix. So parents still have to keep their information updated, and it's down to their individual child. If their child gets sick throughout the day because of being exposed over the weekend, we need your contact information so that we can safely get your child to you. You can get them home or to some medical supports, or determine are they infected, to keep everyone in the building safe. And just one of the biggest thing is just keeping the conversation open and realistic to the administrators. We're supporting our staff, we're supporting the students, and we're supporting families, and we're supporting each other, and just keeping that conversation open that this is tough. This is unprecedented waters. Like I said, I've gone through a lot when we talk about, Sandy Hook, we just talk about Snowmageddon. We manage through tragedy and change, but managing a pandemic where we start to question our value. Are we really valued? But then we love the fact that we're still compensated. We're not struggling on that end. It's just the reality of the challenge that goes on, and being able to talk about it and support through it, and then keep saying, we know we can make a difference in the lives of our children, just like you said, that are most compromised medically, as well as compromised educationally. So we want to be able to talk about it and support each other, and still champion for our kids and each other.
Thank you for that. I work with the upper grades, but I have many friends who work with the littles, and just the stress of figuring out how to keep the kindergartners from doing what kindergartners do. My hat is off to you. My heart goes out to you and your staff. And again, if anyone wants to donate, we will get their information to you, Principal Otway, because the phrase "it takes a village" could not be any more true than it is this year. And my hat goes off to every classroom teacher who is now burdened with making sure that they teach children in a loving, supportive way, but that they also keep them safe and themselves safe. So thank you for leading that effort at your school, and hats off to you.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about social emotional safety. What is, for those who may not be in education and may not, these buzzwords may not come firsthand, what is social emotional safety?
So we all have it, and we kind of think of it when we're upset. How are we dealing with how we interact with each other, and how are things impacting our emotions? And as adults, we can think about the debate last night, how we felt about it, and then how did we respond? We look at the social emotional composure between the two candidates, and we see it all the time. But when we think about young minds, we have to think about, what are they going through? What do middle schoolers need? What do high schoolers need? They need each other. And that has been extremely limited. My sister works in the mental health. She has a practice in Maryland. And she said that some of her clients, she does a lot of teleservice. She had a young lady who was like, no, I need something real. Like, I need something real. And so we think kids are on the technology all the time. They're, sitting there learning community, TikTok and all this resources that we use. And they want something real. They want connection. And so when we think about where are they social emotionally, when we think they're impacted, they know Black Lives Matter is a huge topic. Do I matter? Am I being disenfranchised in my educational location? But who's there to talk about it? My parents are suffering right now, or I'm suffering, or I'm seeing my parents upset. And are we talking to children? Are we talking to children to manage how they're feeling and saying, I understand it? Are we making safe decisions and being okay? Maisha, we've decided that you're going to stay home, but here's what we can do. Let's talk about it. How does that make you feel? I want you to be safe, but what does that make you feel? What can we do to help support you and your connections with others that's safe? And, or parents, Maisha, I need you to go to school and I need you to wear your mask all day because mom has to go out and work, but how does that make you feel? What do you need? And so when we think about social emotion, we think about supporting the children through this, because if we're going through it as adults, or we're not, that doesn't mean that your children are not, or it doesn't, so you want to make sure that you're talking with them. And there's services. Our school, thankfully, has services allotted for mental health. That's tele, or there are different offices throughout Fulton County, different companies that have partnered over the years with Fulton County Public Schools. So students have services, and those services have not stopped, and they've actually increased. So a school like mine that has a large number of families who cannot afford private services, now throughout the entire district, families are able to access that support for their children. And so making sure that our children are okay and finding ways to navigate that conversation appropriately for the age group. So you think about a child in kindergarten, this is his first time going to school. They're going to school, we did a roll-in Fulton County, 2 students in the classroom. For some, that was a nice roll-in. You benefited from it. I know as a school, we did benefit from the slow roll-in and the practices, but then that could be very scary. Yeah. Very scary. Your neighbor's not in the room with you, or maybe your cousin was in the classroom with a whole 20 kids. Now they're 2. And then she's talking to some kids online. Those are all things that impacts children thinking, walking to the cafeteria, and then the fears that the children may have because they hear adults discussing it. And they may be true fears that you have to navigate, or they heard you talking to your sister, your cousin, and they misinterpreted it. So it's really taking care of our kids the way they think, just like us. But then if we're not sure how to do it, getting support from others in the community, or the good Google. If I Googled it right now, 50 articles, you figure out which one is good. But the schools have resources, and they're dying to help you. They're dying to help themselves, so they're dying to help you because it's out there. So reach out to the school. What can you do to help me? I've had students who self-elected. When is Ms. Garcia's going to be available? I need to talk to someone. Students who we didn't even know they knew who Ms. Garcia was, right? But not all students know that exists in the school. So, and all students won't advocate for themselves. So really making sure that we're taking care of the kids, not just about their academics, that doesn't go away, but really making sure that we're having conversations with them to help support their emotions and their interactions with each other.
So a great, and correct me if I misheard you, for the parents who are watching, a great place to start to find resources for their own social and emotional health is the school.
Yep, absolutely.
Call your school, parents. Call your school. Because we know that parents are trying to balance their feelings and their emotions. This is not anything that any of us, I think the word unprecedented has been used ad nauseum, but this is not an experience that any of us have. So most of us, if not all of us, are ill-equipped to handle this, and we're all just figuring it out as the months go along. So that's really good to know. Parents, if you need resources, especially for social emotional health, reach out to your school. There are parent advocates and resources there to help you. I want to get into racial progression safety. What is racial progression safety?
So it's not a word that I heard other than I think it in my mind. As a race, as minorities, as a people of color, we know that education has been an area where we know we have to thrive, but the system is not necessarily designed for us to thrive. And when you add a pandemic onto that, it can stop that progression, right? So I put that word together in my mind that we have to keep that safe. What alarms me as a school principal, when I hear certain grade levels or certain ages and they're saying, well, school is over, you know, this is not real school. No, it's real school. Because if we were drowning before COVID, we're going to drown even more if we're not tapping into all of those resources that make school effective for our community. So we will not continue to progress as a race if we don't continue to reach those supports and be even more engaged. Technology has increased. Now you can reach out to your teacher and have a meeting online when maybe before your schedule was really crazy and you couldn't physically go into school. And so you had to have a phone conference. Well, now you can have a technology conference. It's average. That's a normal thing people do. So you can connect and continue to progress and continue to not live up to the stereotype that things are not going to be better for us at the end of this. We have to make sure that we are connecting even more with the school. We're building the relationships with the resources, and we're progressing as a racial group of people of color. And so we want to progress. We want to make sure that we're not pretending school is not happening. Oh, it's kindergarten. No, they're going to be behind. We look at the state. Betsy DeVos has made it very clear. She has put us back in the classrooms. She has put us back in school. She has made it clear that we're going to take assessments at the end of the year. Yes, the state of Georgia has been very adamant about making those things not count. But if Betsy DeVos is still in her seat, she's going to make it count. And those who are going to suffer are going to be us, people of color. Black and brown are going to suffer even more. So we don't have time to play and say, it's easier for me to keep Johnny at home and get a packet and not really do it. Let's find a way to make this happen for our kids together. Let's improve our relationship with schools so that we can improve the systemic racism that has been put in our schools and take it back. And this all ties into the safety of our future, the safety of our voting, and just not proving this is a true pandemic. It is impacting our community. Let's take advantage of the ability to make our race move forward so that we can come out either better or definitely not worse than where we were before it started.
So this is not time to tap out. This is time to tap in.
Real school. School is going on. Device or no device, school still hold your teachers accountable, build those relationships, get the resources, monitor your child, make sure they're doing their work. Are they completing those assignments? Get involved even more because the gap will get bigger. If your child was 1 year behind, don't say COVID, oh, that was a year of COVID. It's not an excuse. Work with us. We're going to work with you. We have to move right now between all these topics that are nationwide. The world is watching. Let's prove what we know we can do as a community.
Thank you. This is definitely time for us to lean in to the barriers and make the barriers our strength. So having to be virtual, that can be a strength. Being able to, as you said, Principal Otway, being able to get online with your teacher at any point, being able to access multiple teachers through technology, being able to access your principal or your mental health resources. This is time for us to tap in because the world has not stopped. And so we shall not either. While we navigate these tough decisions and thinking about community and families and taking actions to prepare their children to make decisions around schools, what school policies or procedures should parents be looking out for, or how can they get involved with policy and decision making at their schools?
One of the major policies and decision making about school right now has been whether to open or not. And so being a part of those board meetings, speaking with your board member, they're there for you, they advocate for you, they have one employee, and that one employee is a superintendent of schools. So Fulton County is a huge district with opinions and decisions, financial, political, and education has been placed in the middle. So the huge policies are speaking with your board members, getting your friends to speak with their board members within your school system, and speaking so that policies can be made for the voices that are heard. And then they tell their one employee what they want. And so that's number one. Within the schoolhouse, communicating with the school leadership. There's the PTA within Fulton County Schools. We have School Governance Council. In Atlanta Public Schools, they have councils as well. It's how you communicate with the decisions that are made at your school. If your kindergarten and your first graders don't have devices right now, because that's the district decision and the district funding, right now, if we probably were trying to order a device for those grade levels, we probably wouldn't get them because of the demand, but you get to choose how your school spends their money. So the next activity, first the graders and kindergartners, that's a decision so that you can have funding. You can have a device in your home and your own device if you have it, and you don't have to share it or compromise and have to learn learning bundles. So right in your school, there's decision-making practices being involved, speaking with your parent liaison, speaking with the leaders at the school, but then speaking with your school board members would be the big, huge policies that have impacted definitely by COVID. We've seen decisions made that maybe we're not comfortable with. And that's even how you get your food delivered to you. There's a state school board being involved, the state and Georgia. There's voting policies. In the state of Georgia, there's an elected official that runs what happens in education. And so when it comes to voting, know about your board members on the ballots when their elections come up, and so are who is over the Department of Education in the state of Georgia. So you want to be aware of those policies about money, those policies that are on the voting ballots, about voters' rights and locations, schools being open, schools being closed. There's a lot of voting in the regular election, general election, that has to do with education as well.
Thank you for that. Parents, I hope you've been paying attention. We will be emailing everyone who registered with their email address. We have a wealth of information for you on voting, on school decision making. If you are in Fulton County, you have until Friday. October 2nd is Friday, correct? You have until Friday to make your decision on whether or not your child will be going face-to-face or continue to be remote and learn virtually. So all of that information on, like I said, voting, community engagement, community economics, all of the panelists in their organizations who are represented here tonight. If you have left your email when you registered, you will be receiving all of that information with all of the links. So make sure you check your email this evening and tomorrow so that you can receive all this information. I'd like to close out with just asking of Ms. Rollins, Mr. Waller, Commissioner, or Dr. Otway, what is your hope for this last quarter of 2020? We've been seeing a lot online that 2020 was just throw the whole year away. But we know that that's not a reality, right? We've got to make lemonade out of lemons, right? What is your hope for your respective industries with community economics, with voting, with education for the rest of 2020?
I'll just say that my biggest hope is grace and empathy. I think COVID has allowed there to be this hyper lens on the challenges that teachers were having. Like teachers were already having it rough, in APS prior to the pandemic. Now we're looking at those challenges that working parents, kids that are being raised by their grandparents, multiple children, in one home, that have to share a device or no device at all. We're looking at entrepreneurs who are having to make a decision. Do they continue running their business, or do they stay at home, with their children? Maybe their child has, some autoimmune issues. So I think my biggest request for the end of the year is just grace. Grace, and there to be a hyper focus or attention on your community, like getting to know your neighbor, knowing what your neighbor needs. That helps a conversation around voting and the support that is required. So my biggest hope is just grace. And that people do vote. I would like to have a new president for 2021, right? So the biggest thing is to have an understanding about how community works. And let's not go into 2021 doing community how we've been doing community. So that's what I'm going to ask for, that we've been able to kind of look at and identify some of the things that are necessary, but then let's reimagine and get back to the basics of being able to not only know your teacher, be able to support that team that's there, knowing your community, and supporting your local mom and pop businesses, who might not have, those resources that they need right now because of the pandemic. They were already kind of struggling before. So my biggest hope for the last 3 months of this year is grace. And I hope those teachers at APS, y'all get a good little break, leading into the holiday season. So I would just ask for grace. That's my hope.
Well, now I have to come up with one because you took mine, but it's a good one.
Mine?
What about you, Waller, or Principal Otway?
Okay, I'll go next. I want to say connection, for us to remain connected. We've done a lot of, teaching has transformed since March to now into a venue that we've seen it in pockets. We see it developing, and staying connected with those best practices, staying connected with the positivity. While we stay connected with those, we know, like Ms. Rollins mentioned, that teachers, there are 50 million memes. All you did was change that COVID happened that were before, but we've made some steps in the right direction. But staying connected with those positive steps, as well as making sure that we continue to take care of each other. I've had conversations with my staff as a leader that have been totally different than what I've ever had. It's like, this is about instruction. Let's get to it. Yep, love you. I'll listen to what you have to say, but let's get to instruction. Instruction is still the main thing, but we do it through connection and understanding what people are going through, understanding how this has impacted everyone, as well as embracing the community through connection. So I hope for the next few months that we continue to benefit from those connections and thrive throughout 2021 with the new president.
That's a great one. Mr. Waller?
Well, we're a nonpartisan organization, so I can't say, with the president change. But I will say that I hope the next 3 months bring about, I guess, meaningful change in the country. COVID has exposed a lot of issues that we all knew existed, from education, voting, economics, things that have plagued our communities for decades and probably more than a century, but now is being brought to the light for everyone else. So I just hope that for the coming months, people still have that same desire and fire within them to turn out to vote, make sure that things change on that level, so that way we can start getting changed on other aspects of our lives.
Well said. And I believe Commissioner Arrington might have had to leave, probably getting ready for early voting, but I'll go. I hope that we all can be emotionally innovative, and that understanding that everything we need is right here. We've got with grace and connections and everything else, with community, everything we need is right within us and within our community. So I'm hoping for a shift in our perspective on exactly how powerful we are, how innovative we can be, and how great we can be at achieving all of our goals, and hopefully setting goals that we had not even dared to set previously. I would like to thank everybody for your time tonight. Thank you to Ms. Butler and Commissioner Arrington, Principal Otway, Ms. Rollins, Mr. Waller, and absolutely have to give a huge shout out to the Gathering Spot, Fulton County, the Black Cross and the Coalition for the People's Agenda. We're going to give a shout out to our elementary schools in Fulton County and the Connect Cooperative, and everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you so much. Don't forget that if you put your email in your registration, you will receive all of the information that our panelists spoke about tonight. So thank you on behalf of all of the organizations that I mentioned. I'm Janine Lewis. Have a good night.